and they start shooting at anything that moved. Had no care for life. And this was obvious when they come out of the bank.
I was laying on top of one of the detectives that wasn't wearing any body armor at the time.
I thought that was the day I was gonna die.
I was shot 4 times. I had 1 round go through the lower part of my vest.
And he gets shot in the hand. He drops it, picks it up, puts the gun under his chin, and presses the trigger. And proceed to shoot under our car at him, and we hit him 28 times. He looks up at me, and his comment was, "Why don't you just put a round through my head?"
One of the most violent days in LAPD history unfolded on live television on February 28, 1997, when 2 bank robbers wearing body armor and wielding intense rifles engaged in a ferocious gunfight with officers on the streets of North Hollywood. This is that ferocious story. The culprits meet. Larry Eugene Phillips Jr. and Emil Decibel Mata Serrano were the 2 men who attempted to rob the Bank of America in North Hollywood, California. The planning and implementation of this crime were well thought out, and it is believed that the 2 men met while working as security guards. Larry Eugene Phillips Jr. was born on November 20th, 1970 in Los Angeles, California. Phillips grew up in a rough neighborhood in Los Angeles and was exposed to violence at a young age. His parents divorced when he was only 5 years old, and he was raised by his mother and stepfather. Phillips had a difficult relationship with his stepfather, who he believed favored his younger siblings over him. He dropped out of high school and got a job as a security guard to support himself. Phillips had a fascination with guns and began collecting them, often spending hours at the shooting range practicing his aim. He even had a makeshift shooting range in his backyard. Phillips' interest in guns and violence escalated over time, and he began to identify with the white supremacist movement. He had several tattoos, including one that read Celtic Pride and another that featured a swastika. Phillips also had a history of drug misuse and was known to use steroids. In 1995, Phillips was arrested for stealing a police car and leading officers on a high-speed chase. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison but was released after serving only 2.5 years. It is believed that Phillips met Emil Decibel Mata Serrano while working as a security guard after his release from prison. Chapter 2. Emil Decibel Mata Serrano was born on July 19, 1966 in Romania. He moved to the United States when he was young and grew up in Southern California. His childhood was anything but pleasant, as his family struggled financially. Mata Serrano was known to be quiet and reserved, and he kept to himself. He had a reputation for being a skilled mechanic and enjoyed working on cars in his spare time. Mata Serrano was also interested in bodybuilding and spent a lot of time at the gym. Despite his reserved nature, Mata Serrano had a history of drug misuse and was known to use steroids. He was also reportedly in debt and may have seen the North Hollywood bank robbery as a way to get out of financial trouble. Mata Serrano dropped out of high school and worked odd jobs before becoming a security guard. He worked for several security companies, including one that employed him and Larry Eugene Phillips Jr. Phillips and Mata Serrano worked together on a few occasions and eventually became friends. They bonded over their love for guns and would often talk about them. It is believed that they began planning the North Hollywood bank robbery during one of their conversations. Phillips and Mata Serrano both felt that they deserved more money and that robbing a bank would be an easy way to get it. They spent months planning the robbery, which involved purchasing weapons, building body armor, and scoping out the bank. They even rented an apartment near the bank to use as a hideout. This was not their first rodeo. On June 14, 1995, Phillips and Mata Serrano ambushed a Brinks armored car in Winnetka, Los Angeles, slaughtering one guard, Herman Cook, and seriously wounding another. In May 1996, they robbed 2 branches of Bank of America in the San Fernando Valley area of Los Angeles, stealing approximately $1.5 million US. The pair were dubbed the High Incident Bandits by investigators due to the weapons they had used in the 3 robberies prior to their attempt in Northern Hollywood. On the day of their most infamous robbery, February 28, 1997, they arrived at the bank dressed in heavy body armor and armed with fully auto rifles, pistols, and grenades.
Just after 9 o'clock on a Friday, right here in front of this bank, the robbery, 2 men who had, to calm their nerves, had taken a lot of prescription drugs. A flurry of police officers met them, but they were heavily armed. Thought there was $750,000 in there, and they thought they could walk out of there. And what happened next was probably one of the wildest shootouts in the history of all of this nation.
The heist commences. On the morning of February 28, 1997, Larry Eugene Phillips Jr. and Emil Decibel Mata Serrano, both heavily armed and wearing body armor, entered the North Hollywood Bank of America branch located at 6600 Laurel Canyon Boulevard in Los Angeles. They were carrying fully automatic rifles and had homemade explosives strapped to their bodies.
When you hit somebody with some rounds, they stop. It basically just got his attention. You know, a 9mm against a AK-47, it was pretty unfair.
Phillips and Mata Serrano had planned the robbery meticulously, spending months acquiring their weapons and modifying them to allow them to fire more rounds than legally possible. They had also studied the layout of the bank and had prepared for any potential police response. As soon as they entered the bank, Phillips and Montesaranu started firing their weapons. They quickly gained control of the building, sending customers and employees fleeing for their lives.
And I can feel the nozzle of the rifle being placed on my back. And I said, well, let's go to the vault. He hit me with the rifle on the side of the head, like, I mean business. He's saying, where's all of it? I want you to open up all of it, you know? I'm not emptying in the amount of cash that maybe he was expecting. I can feel it in his tone. Now he's getting a little more aggressive in all the money that's in that cabin. He got upset. So what does he do? He opens fire.
They also set off several of their homemade explosives, causing chaos and destruction inside the bank. The police were notified of the robbery and quickly arrived on the scene. However, they were not prepared for the level of firepower that Phillips and Montesaranu had. The duo carried Norinco Type 56 rifles, which is a Chinese AK-47 variant, a Bushmaster XM15 dissipator with a 100-round drum mag, and a Heckler & Koch HK91 rifle, all of which, except for the HK91, had been illegally modified to be select fire capable, as well as a Beretta 92 FS pistol. No match. The robbers had all these powerful weapons and body armor that made them nearly impervious to the police's standard issue handguns. The local patrol officers at the time had 9mm pistols or .38 special revolvers. Some patrol cars were also equipped with a 12-gauge shotgun, which was no match for the array of weapons that the robbers brought with them. The police tried to engage in a shootout with the robbers, but quickly realized they were outmatched. The robbers were firing at the police with fatal accuracy, while the police struggled to hit them with their handguns. Despite the overwhelming police response, Phillips and Montesaranu managed to escape the bank and started firing at police officers on the street. The two men moved down Laurel Canyon Boulevard, exchanging gunfire with police officers and civilians alike. As the shootout continued, more and more police officers arrived on the scene. After LAPD radio operators received the second officer down call from police at the shootout, a tactical alert was issued. A SWAT team arrived 18 minutes after the shooting had begun. They were armed heavily and wore running shoes and shorts under their body armor, as they had been on an exercise run when they received the call. The SWAT team had higher caliber weapons, but they had little effect on the heavy body armor used by the two perpetrators. The SWAT team also commandeered an armored car to evacuate the wounded. Several officers additionally equipped themselves with AR-15s and other semi-auto rifles from a nearby firearms dealer. They tried to block off the area around the bank, but Phillips and Montesaranu were determined to escape.
At that time, I was assigned to the SWAT team, and they start shooting at anything that moved. Had no care for life. And this was obvious when they come out of the bank. Uniformed police officers were outgunned. They don't have assault rifles, the suspects do.
They continued to fire their weapons, causing destruction and chaos in the surrounding neighborhood. At one point during the shootout, Phillips was hit by a bullet in his right arm. However, he continued to fire his weapon with his left hand. Montesaranu was also injured but managed to keep firing. The police realized that their standard issue handguns were no match for the robbers' heavily modified rifles. They called in SWAT teams to the scene, who were equipped with more powerful weapons and armor. The SWAT teams arrived on the scene and engaged in a prolonged gun battle with the robbers. The shootout lasted for over 40 minutes and involved over 300 police officers. The robbers continued to fire at the public, causing widespread destruction in the surrounding area. They shot out car windows, damaged buildings, and injured several civilians who were caught in the crossfire. Eventually, the police were able to subdue the robbers. Phillips was shot in the head and perished instantly.
He continues to walk down Archwood, takes out a Beretta 9mm and handgun, starts shooting at anything that moves.
As you can see, they are opening fire right now.
Phillips, as he has a malfunction with his AK-47, he drops it, and he gets shot in the hand. He drops it, picks it up, puts the gun under his chin, and presses the trigger. Through the side, misses the vest, and severs his spine. As he goes down, an unknown uniformed patrol officer fires and hits him in the upper torso.
Montesaranu surrendered but passed away later on. Later reports showed that Montesaranu had been shot 29 times in the legs and passed from trauma due to excessive blood loss from 2 gunshot wounds in his left thigh.
Until he stops being a threat and he stops shooting at us. And proceed to shoot under our car at him, and we hit him 28 times. He looks up at me and his comment was, "Why don't you just put a round through my head?" I have a few words with him. The 3 of us take the suspect into custody, and I take the ski mask off of Emil Montesaranu, and We then cuff him and turn him over to the detective.
The aftermath. The North Hollywood bank shootout was one of the longest and most violent gun battles in American history. It shocked the nation and raised concerns about the availability of powerful weapons to civilians. The robbers had allegedly filled a jam jar with gasoline and placed it in the back seat with the intention of setting the car and weapons on fire to destroy evidence after the robbery, although they never quite got around to using it. In total, 12 police officers and 8 civilians were injured in the shootout.
I was laying on top of one of the detectives that wasn't wearing any body armor at the time.
I thought that was the day I was gonna die.
I was shot 4 times. I had 1 round go through the lower part of my vest.
However, no one other than Phillips and Montesaranu met demise in the incident. The police response was praised for its professionalism and bravery, as the officers risked their lives to protect the public from the heavily armed robbers.
As a result of the shooting, there are rifles in all the police cars, in all the stations. If this were to happen today, the incident would be over before SWAT would get there. All police officers are trained with assault rifles to be able to handle this type of a situation.
In the aftermath of the shootout, investigators discovered that Phillips and Montesaranu had a large stockpile of weapons and ammunition in their homes. They also found evidence that the 2 men had been planning other robberies in the Los Angeles area. The North Hollywood bank shootout is widely considered one of the most significant and intense gun battles in the history of the U.S. law enforcement. The shootout was marked by a high number of injuries and rounds fired, as well as the sophisticated equipment employed by the robbers. Lasting for over 40 minutes, the gun battle involved the firing of approximately 1,100 rounds by the 2 robbers, while police officers fired approximately 650 rounds.
He mentioned Rodney King, the Rampart scandal. In his remarks today, Chief Charlie Beck said during the 1990s, the image of the LAPD took a beating.
In a time when it desperately needed it. And because of that, we all were very proud.
But then he said the Hollywood shootout changed the image.
You defined this organization.
The LAPD refers to February 28, 1997, the day willpower defeated firepower. The only fatalities, the 2 men who tried to rob the bank. Incredibly, no police officers were killed that day, although 11 were shot. 7 bystanders were also shot and injured. High-powered rifles are now something they always carry. One officer about that day, I was in the wrong place with the wrong gun. It'll never happen again with the LAPD. Things changed dramatically.
Staggering estimates suggest that nearly 2,000 rounds were fired in total during the incident. That's all for today, folks. See you next time.